Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to look at a global pollutant that's so small and so widespread, it's basically invisible. And we're going to uncover the really clever chemistry scientists are using to finally bring it into the light. So the big question is, how do you even begin to find something you can't see? We're talking about microplastics. These tiny, tiny fragments, a lot of them are smaller than a sesame seed. And they have gotten into pretty much every corner of our world. Their size obviously makes them incredibly difficult to find and to track. And when I say everywhere, I mean literally everywhere, from the deepest parts of the ocean to the very air we're breathing and, yep, even in our food. These microscopic plastic particles are just part of our world now. And that poses this huge challenge for scientists who are just trying to figure out how big this problem really is. So how in the world do you start counting millions of these little specks? Well, it turns out scientists found a brilliant solution. They're basically using a chemical spotlight to force the plastics to reveal themselves. And that spotlight is a dye called Nile Red. Now, its superpower comes from a property with a very fancy name, Solvatochromism. But don't worry about the word. Just think of it like a chemical chameleon. It changes its color, or in this case, its ability to glow, all depending on the environment it's in. What's really cool is the molecule itself. I mean, look at that specific, complex structure. It's that exact shape and chemical makeup that acts kind of like a key, one that's designed to find and light up plastic in a way that other molecules just can't. So how does this all work? Well, Nile Red has this really clever turn-on trick that makes it just perfect for the job. It's not just about staining something, it's about actually flipping a switch from dark to light. The whole secret comes down to a concept you probably remember from science class, polarity. The easiest way to think about it is oil and water, right? Water is polar, oil, and it turns out plastic, are non-polar. And as we all know, they do not like to mix. And this right here explains the core principle perfectly. When Nile Red is just floating around in water, that polar environment, its molecular structure is all twisted up and it doesn't really produce much light. The switch is off. But the second it finds a nonpolar surface, like a piece of microplastic, it latches on, its structure untwists, and all that energy gets released as a bright fluorescent glow. The switch flips on. It's that simple. Okay, so that's the theory. Now let's take a look at how scientists actually put this chemical light switch to use in the lab, with a real sample from the environment. The process itself is surprisingly straightforward. You just take your sample, add the Nile Red dye, shine a specific kind of light on it, and then use a camera and some software to count everything that lights up. This simplicity is key because it allows for really rapid, high-throughput screening of a ton of samples. And here's a really smart part of the method. They do the test in a glass vial. Why? Well, glass is hydrophilic. It loves water. But the dye, it's looking for hydrophobic surfaces, things that hate water, like plastic. So the dye just completely ignores the container it's in. It's laser-focused only on the plastic particles floating around in that sample. And boom, this is what you get. A single glowing particle that was totally lost in the sample is now found. This visual is just so striking, right? It transforms a hidden pollutant into a target that's not only visible, but most importantly, countable. But as elegant and powerful as this technique is, it's not some perfect silver bullet. Like with any scientific method, you got to consider the nuances and the limitations. For instance, it turns out you can have too much of a good thing. There's this Goldilocks concentration for the dye. Not too little, not too much. If you use too little dye, the signal is pretty weak. But if you add too much dye, the dye molecules actually start interfering with each other and they dim the glow. It's a process they call quenching. Scientists also have to think about other variables. The dye works way better on some plastics like polyethylene than on others. And sometimes natural stuff like little bits of shellfish or wood can also get stained by the dye, which gives you a false positive. Even the color of the plastic itself can cause problems, especially black plastics. They can be really tricky to stain. So what this means is that a huge part of the analysis isn't just about seeing what glows. It's about developing really careful rules and using software to tell the difference between a true plastic particle and one of these natural imposters. It's a mix of chemistry and some serious digital detective work. But even with all those challenges, you just can't overstate how important this method is. It really represents a massive leap forward in our ability to even see the problem. What really makes the Nile Red method so valuable is that it's cheap, it's fast, and it uses equipment that most labs already have.
That simplicity has made it the go-to screening tool for researchers all over the planet.
And because it helps us see what's actually there, this technique provides the hard data we need to confirm what scientists have suspected for a long time, that microplastics are absolutely everywhere in our planet's ecosystems. And really, that's the true power of the Nile Red method. It takes this abstract environmental threat and makes it something real, something visible, something measurable. And that is the essential first step. I mean, you can't manage what you can't measure, right?
Look, this technique is a scientific breakthrough, not because it solves the microplastic problem, but because it shines a massive light on it, making the invisible visible. It completely shifts our focus from just trying to find the problem to confronting that much bigger question. So, what are we going to do about it?